Hello, I'm Billy Stewart, Assistant Pastor here at Solid Rock Tabernacle, 1325 Rudy Road in Alma, Arkansas. Thank you for joining us for the broadcast. I'd like to extend this personal invitation for you to come join us in one of our spirit-filled services. Our Sunday school begins at 9 a.m., our Sunday morning worship is at 10 a.m., and our Sunday evening worship is at 6 p.m. We also have an exciting Wednesday evening Bible study that begins at 7 p.m. Come join us, won't you? 1325 Rudy Road in Alma, Arkansas. Hey, we'll save a seat for you. And now, let's join our service already in progress.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Sleeping on the rock and everything. Okay. Made an altar. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Now Babylon was Sunday morning. That was Sister. That was that was Sister Bethany teaching that. All right. Let's get into 29 and let's finish up. Let's finish up Jacob's journey. So Genesis 29 verses 1 through 3. Then Jacob went on his journey and came into the land of the people of the east. And he looked, and behold, a well in the field, and lo, there were 3 flocks of sheep lying by it. For out of that well they watered the flocks, and a great stone was upon the well's mouth. And thither were all the flocks gathered, and they rolled the stone from the well's mouth, and watered the sheep, and put the stone again upon the well's mouth in his place. So, because God had blessed Jacob's trip, Jacob returned to the land of his mother, Rebekah, his father, Isaac. Okay? And it was also the land of his grandfather, Abraham. So, as Jacob came near to the home of his mother's family, he noticed that there was a well that was there that they used to water the sheep. But the well was covered and protected by this large stone. They had a protection over it. Okay? Now, going on. And Jacob said unto them, My brethren, whence be ye? And they said, Of Haran are we. And he said unto them, Know ye Laban, the son of Nahor? And they said, We know him. And he said unto them, Is he well? And they said, He is well. And behold, Rachel, his daughter, cometh with the sheep. And he said, Lo, it is yet high day, neither is it time that the cattle should be gathered together. Water ye the sheep, and go and feed them. And they said, We cannot until all the flocks be gathered together, until they roll the stone from the well's mouth, and then we watered the sheep. And while he yet spake with them, Rachel came with her father's sheep, for she kept them. And it came to pass, when Jacob saw Rachel, the daughter of Laban, his mother's brother, and the sheep of Laban, his mother's brother, that Jacob went near and rolled the stone from the well's mouth and watered the flock of Laban, his mother's brother. Okay? So, Rachel is his, yes, cousin. So in this age, obviously they don't have road marks. They don't have road signs. They don't have town signs and population signs and all of this stuff. So, Jacob didn't really know where he was, didn't know exactly where he was at the time. So he asked, which just goes to show that in the beginning, men did ask for directions. But that's interesting, yeah, that there were men that were actually asking for directions back then. But we know from then to the time that they wandered in the wilderness with Moses for 40 years, that somehow that got lost, because if Moses would have just asked directions, he would have made it there. But anyway, after he asked, he found out that he was where he was supposed to be. He was at his destination. Okay? So all Jacob knew was that he needed to make contact with his uncle. So he asked the shepherds, "Hey, do you know Laban?" They said, "Yeah, we know him. Sure, we know him. Yeah, is he okay? Is he well? Yeah, we know him. He's fine. Yeah." So he knew that he was at the right place. And they also told Jacob that Laban's daughter, Rachel, was approaching. She was coming. Now, perhaps at that time, Jacob wanted the shepherd boys to leave. Most likely so he could speak more directly to Rachel, whether it was to tell her what was actually going on or whatever. But we're going to see in a little bit that there was some feelings there right from the start. But Jacob also knew that he had come to marry one of the daughters of Laban. So he sees Rachel, and according to accounts, Rachel's a fairly attractive girl. And he sees her, and he goes, "Hey, I got to marry one of these girls. Why not that one?" So, because of that, he did what a lot of guys do when they're trying to impress a woman. They show kindness to them. "Oh, here, let me help." Eh? The shepherd boys were waiting for somebody to take the stone away. Eh? And Jacob says, "I'll help these boys out and I'll impress Rachel at the same time." So he rolls the stone away. Remember, Jacob's about 70-something years old at this time. But he picks this stone up and he rolls it out of the way. I'm rough and tough, and if that doesn't impress her, nothing's going to. So, yeah. So verses 11 to 14. "And Jacob kissed Rachel and lifted up his voice and wept. And Jacob told Rachel that he was her father's brother and that he was Rebekah's son. And she ran and told her father. And it came to pass, when Laban heard of the tidings of Jacob his sister's son, that he ran to meet him and embraced him and kissed him and brought him to his house. And he told Laban all these things. And Laban said unto him, Surely thou art my bone and my flesh. And he abode with him the space of a month." Now, initially, Rachel was probably pretty surprised on this. Okay? She never met Jacob before he greeted her. She didn't know who Jacob was. He goes, "You're Laban's daughter?" Big kiss, and she's probably going, "Who is this guy? What are you doing?" Okay? So he kissed her. He cried out. He wept. So he's being romantic. He's showing his vulnerable side. No. Okay? And she might have been going there to meet one of the shepherd boys. And Rachel had probably been told about her Aunt Rebekah. Okay? So she knew about Rebekah. And when he says, "I'm Rebekah's son," and she's like, "Oh, okay. Yeah, cool." So Jacob stayed with them for a month. Okay? Now, as I said, she knew about Rachel, or knew about Rebekah, and she knew that she had married into a wealthy and distant relative of the family. And Laban showed this great hospitality for Jacob, okay? Not only because it was the custom, and not only because he was his nephew, Laban also knew that Jacob stood to inherit a significant fortune from his daddy Isaac. So Laban's thinking in his mind, hey, here's a chance for me to get in on this. Right? So verses 15 to 20. And Laban said unto Jacob, because thou art my brother, shouldest thou therefore serve me for naught? Tell me, what shall thy wages be? And Laban had 2 daughters. The name of the elder was Leah, and the name of the younger was Rachel. Leah was tender-eyed, but Rachel was beautiful and well-favored. And Jacob loved Rachel, and said, I will serve thee 7 years for Rachel thy younger daughter. And Laban said, it is better that I give her to thee than I should give her to another man. Abide with me. And Jacob served 7 years for Rachel, and they seemed unto him but a few days for the love that he had for her. Now, this might have seemed like a pretty nice offer. But really, Laban let Jacob know that if he wanted to remain among them, he had to stay as a hired servant. He wasn't going to allow him to come and just be somebody who was, a family visiting and moving in with them. No, if you're going to come live with me, if you're going to come live here, you got to be a hired servant. That's why he asked him, what wages should it be? Now remember, Jacob was the son of a man of tremendous wealth. Isaac was the wealthiest of all the men, was greatest of all the people, because he had inherited Abraham, what Abraham had. And certainly he was not lazy. Okay? Back in those days, they didn't have a chance to be lazy. But even though he wasn't lazy, he really wasn't used to hard work either. You see, back home, all the servants did the hard work. He had to do some of it, but the servants did the really hard stuff. Now, Jacob was a servant. Okay? Now you get to do the hard stuff. And Jacob's reaction in this situation revealed a lot about his character. And it demonstrates a rather important principle to us. That principle is this: you never know what kind of servant you are until others treat you like a servant. Think about that. Let that sink in a second. You never know what kind of servant you are until somebody treats you like a servant. Now, just walk all over you. Okay? Now, Jacob loved Rachel. We can see the way his reaction was when she first came up, and then he's been there a month. It was pretty much love at first sight. He fell in love with her, and then the month that he stayed there with them, he just grew more deeply in love. And he was deeply in love with Rachel, because she was not only outwardly beautiful, but she was also the first friendly face that Jacob had seen when he came to that area. So that made an impression on him. And it's understandable why he had a love at first sight attachment to Rachel. Now, what did it say about Leah? It says Leah was tender-eyed. Well, What does that mean? Okay, shy. All right. So what does that mean? And Jen says, what does it mean? Let's see. Perfect answer. What does it mean? I'm so glad you asked, Jen. Let me answer that for you. There's some dispute as what this phrase actually means. Some think that her eyes were bad and she couldn't see well. Okay? And others tend to think that maybe her eyes were dull. They were not beautiful and full of life like her sister Rachel's eyes. Okay? Rachel got the looks in the family. Maybe she got the brains, but Rachel got the looks. And so Leah was used to the other guys always looking to Rachel. So she was just kind of, she was the one that was there, but nobody really paid much attention to, right? The comparison of Rachel and Leah and their respective beauty is a small clue as to what was probably a complicated, conflict-filled, and competitive family life. Now, think about that. I know, being the best looking one in my family, that they were always, the rest of the family was always, upset and jealous of me. Oh, yeah, no, that didn't happen. That didn't happen. But, you get some families, you get some people that are just, they have a child that is just gorgeous, that's always wins the beauty pageants and all that other stuff. And then you've got the other child that's just kind of there. Not real, not ugly, but not beauty pageant material, And there's always competition between the two of them. And this, I'm sure, had a complicated family life between these two, because men were always looking to Rachel, yet Leah's the oldest. She's the one that's supposed to get married first, okay? So the offer to work for 7 years for Rachel was essentially a dowry, right? A dowry is what the groom has to pay to the father or to the family. Okay? I'm glad it's a custom that's gone away, because basically the groom had to buy the wife, and it's, you're going to be paying for her for the rest of your life anyway. Why would you want? No, yeah, it's there because you're taking away one of the daughters. All right, and though Jacob had come from a family of great wealth, we see by him going to be a servant that was there, he left and didn't have any money. He didn't bring anything with him. He didn't bring any wealth with him when he came. But before he could take a woman in marriage, he had to provide a dowry to demonstrate that he was fit to support a family. That was another aspect of the dowry. It showed that you were financially secure enough that you could support a family. And it was to compensate for the taking of a daughter. So 7 years was a generous offer. He's working for 7 years. No pay except room and board to get Rachel. Right? That's far and above the normal dowry. But, that all depended on who it was, on the family. But 7 years of working for free was excessive in anybody's eyes. But Jacob didn't want to risk being turned down. He loved Rachel that much. Okay? And when Laban saw how badly Jacob wanted Rachel, now he says, I can take advantage of this guy. And he does. Because of his great love for Rachel, the 7 years of labor without pay, except for room and board, seemed to pass by as quickly as days to him. He loved her so much that it was like 7 years was just a matter of a few days to him. So in this ancient culture, Jacob was not allowed to spend a lot of time or as much time as he wanted with Rachel. Rachel was part of the master's family. Remember, Jacob is a servant right now. And that just, those two didn't, those two just didn't, y'all didn't, they didn't talk and do all that stuff before. Okay? And there were strict social guidelines between unmarried men and women and how they were able to get together, things like that. So this demonstrates another principle. True love waits. True love waits. They had a thing in the 90s. Some of you may remember it. That was going around a lot of churches that was called True Love Waits. And teenagers especially, were making commitments that they weren't going to engage in sexual intercourse with a woman until they were married. True love waits. Okay? Some may debate the success of this particular campaign, but the principle remains. Jacob was willing to wait 7 years for Rachel. Now let's look at verses 21 to 25. And Jacob said unto Laban, Give me my wife, for my days are fulfilled, that I may go in unto her. And Laban gathered together all the men of the place and made a feast. And it came to pass in the evening that he took Leah his daughter and brought her to him, and he went in unto her. And Laban gave unto his daughter Leah Zilpah, his maid, for a handmaid. And it came to pass that in the morning, behold, it was Leah. And he said to Laban, What is this that thou hast done unto me? Did I not serve with thee for Rachel? Wherefore then hast thou beguiled me? Now, these words are pretty clear enough, right? Even though Jacob waited the 7 years like he was supposed to, and the time went by quickly because he loved Rachel so much, when the time was up, he said, I'm done waiting now. I'm done waiting. I've done my 7 years. Give me my wife. Give me Rachel. And how did Laban respond? He responded by inviting a bunch of guests over, having a wedding. There it is. They're having a good old time. And as they were having this good old time, Laban pulled the old bait and switch. Hey? He sent Leah in. Instead of Rachel, Jacob got Leah. Now, it was possible for Jacob to be fooled because of the wedding customs of the day. Most people would think, well, he would see that this wasn't Rachel at the wedding. But in the custom of the day, the wife was veiled until she was finally alone with her husband at the honeymoon, in the honeymoon suite. And Laban had made sure to make everything drag out until it was dark. So by the time he was alone with his wife, he couldn't see her. It was dark. Okay? So this helps to explain how Jacob was fooled. Now, we can assume that Leah was in agreement to this. Yet, even if she was not, she was under the absolute authority of her father, so she didn't have a choice. The absolute authority of the father in the home also explains why Rachel allowed this to happen. You see, you would think that Rachel would have spoke up too. Because apparently through all of this, it seems we can deduce that Rachel wanted to be with Jacob too. So she allowed this to happen because her father told her, and the father has absolute authority over everyone. Okay? So in the morning, Jacob realizes the deception. What's going on? Now, we can only imagine how Jacob felt. Okay? And how Leah felt. And of course, how poor Rachel felt. All of this because of Laban's sin. But wait a minute. Was it because of Laban's sin? Or was it because of Jacob's sin? Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. The deceiver was now the deceived. Okay? Laban's deception towards Jacob was similar to the deception Jacob put on his father Isaac, like Sister Jen said, and his brother Esau. Okay? This is a prime example right here of Jacob reaping what he sowed. Jacob exchanged the younger for the older. Laban exchanged the older for the younger. When Jacob deceived his father and cheated his brother, God did not change his plan to choose Jacob to receive his birthright. Instead, what God did is he sent Jacob to school. What do you mean? Well, he sent him to the school of hard knocks. This shows that our disobedience may not derail God's plan for our lives, but it will greatly affect the way we end up experiencing it. You see, God's plan will still stay. Now, how we experience that plan may be entirely different. Okay? One might spend 20 years working for someone like Laban. Wow, God teaches a few things. Though we can see this was God's correction on Jacob, it in no way justifies Laban's deception. The fact that God does work all things together for good never excuses the evil that men do. Okay? Now, let's look at verses 26 to 30. And Laban said, "It must not be so done in our country, to give the younger before the firstborn. Fulfill her week, and we will give thee this also for the service which thou shalt serve with me yet 7 other years." And Jacob did so, and fulfilled her week, and he gave him Rachel his daughter to wife also. And Laban gave to Rachel his daughter Bilhah his handmaid to be her maid. And he went in also unto Rachel, and he loved also Rachel more than Leah, and served with him yet 7 other years. Now, the excuse that Laban gives, a little bit lame here. Okay? You know, what do you mean? Didn't we tell you? Oh, that's the way we do things in these parts. You see, you know, you got to give the firstborn before you give the other ones. Did we not tell you that? I'm so sorry. I thought you knew. Everybody around here knows that. Yeah, pretty lame excuse. And the only reason Jacob accepted this is because he had really no other option. Right? But Laban's reason was really just an excuse. So they made a deal for another 7 years for Rachel. Now, if the first 7 years was to graduate from the school of hard knocks, The next 7 years was postgraduate work at the School of Hard Knocks. Right? Laban was the perfect picture of a deceptive manipulator. He ended up getting exactly what he wanted. What did he want? Both of his daughters married. Yet, this would turn out badly for both him and his daughters. One of the ways that God will deal with manipulators, people who manipulate people, is by giving them exactly what they want. And sometimes they'll find out that what they wanted isn't what they really want. Okay? Yet, he'll give them exactly what they want, yet it will become a loss for them rather than a gain. Okay? Now, the problem in this family, you can see it right from the start, immediately. Okay? Not only had Jacob married 2 sisters, but he also let everybody know one was favored and loved more than the other. Think about that. He says, all right, I got to marry both of them, and I'm going to let you know right now, I don't love Leah like that. I love Rachel. He favored Rachel because he loved her more. Okay? And ultimately, all of these problems came from Laban's manipulative deception. And not only that, but it also came from the prior sins of Jacob. Think about that. It wasn't just Laban's sin that caused all the problems. Jacob's sin is probably what started it all in the first place. Number one, let's just look at it, what we've gotten up to so far. Rebecca is pregnant. She finds out she's going to have twins. God tells her, and Isaac, that the older will serve the younger. So, when they're born, Esau is the older, Jacob is the younger. Now, God has already given the birthright to Jacob. He says the younger is going to get it. The younger is going to have the birthright. Yet, through all this time, as they go along, through the years that they are there together, and that they're growing up together, there's deception, there is hardship within the family because of the deception. Remember, Isaac favored Esau, Rebekah favored Jacob. But Jacob was getting the birthright to begin with. So at one point in time, Esau sells his birthright to Jacob for a bowl of stew, because he thinks he's going to starve to death. I'm sure he wasn't about to starve to death. He was, there was no way he was about to starve to death. Yet the birthright didn't mean anything to him anyway. He didn't care. So he sells the birthright to Jacob for a bowl of stew. Then he goes out, then Esau goes out, and he takes wives among the Canaanites, which they didn't want him to do. Then Isaac tries to circumvent God's will by saying he's going to give the blessing to Esau anyway. Okay? Rebecca hears this and she says, ain't happening, getting it, Jacob's getting it. So they go around, manipulate Isaac into getting the blessing. So now Jacob has, through manipulation and all of these things, what was already given to him by God in the first place. And if he'd have just left things well enough alone, he would have got it anyway. Didn't have to do all these things. Well, now his brother wants to kill him because he's got the birthright and the blessing. So now Esau wants to kill him. So Rebekah, his mother, sends Jacob away to her brother. He goes, he meets with God, he sees God. Now he gets it. Now he gets to Haran with Laban, and now he's being deceived. So the trickster, remember what Jacob meant? Yeah. Jacob, the name Jacob means trickster. Now the trickster is being tricked. Now the deceiver is being deceived. Okay? So he put this same deception, Laban, it's kind of like turnabout is fair play. Okay? So he got exactly what he had given. He reaped exactly what he sowed. If you sow corn, you don't go out in the garden looking for tomatoes, because they're not going to be there. Okay? You get what you reap what you sow. Jacob sowed deception. He's now reaping that same deception back. So all of this was partly not just from Laban's sin, but was also partly from Jacob's past sin. So what should Jacob have done? What do you think when he discovers the deception? What do you think Jacob should have done? Take Leah as his wife and went on. Okay. All right. Well, some say that Jacob should have gone to Laban and told him to correct the whole mess. Hey, you messed up. You need to straighten this out. You need to fix it now. And yeah. He said, you just need to correct this and let me be married to Rachel and let Leah be Laban's problem. Let him worry about it. Yet others believe that according to the standards of the culture, he couldn't put Leah aside because she was unable to marry another, having been given to Jacob. So perhaps he should have done the best he could have in that situation, which would have been to love each wife equally. What a mess. Okay? But he gave Rachel as his wife also. Now, polygamy is not... Yeah, he got Rachel to be his wife. She was his wife also, but he had to stay for 7 more years to work it off. Okay?
But he got Rachel then as his wife too?
Yeah.
Plus the 7 more years?
Yeah. He got Rachel and 7 more years of hard labor on that. But this is a big mess. Now, at the time, because he gave him, it implies that he gave Rachel to be married right then, after the 7 days, after they were, because there's a 7-day period there that they have to be together before. So after the 7 days, then he got Rachel to be a wife as well, but he still had to stay there 7 years to work. Right? Now, polygamy wasn't a big deal back in those days. It happened. Right? It's not widely practiced in Western culture. In fact, there's nowhere in Western culture that polygamy is acceptable or even legal right now. Okay? Mormons still believe in it, but they don't practice it. To me, I think it's ridiculous. Why would anybody want two wives at the same time? That just doesn't make any sense to me. But it's not unusual for that, at least in that time, for that to happen. And when we think of polygamy, we think of mass marriage. Somebody having more than one wife, being married to several different girls. Okay? But this is all at the same time that they're married. When you look at it, the country, the Western civilization now, is filled with what we can call serial marriages. Hey, what is a serial marriage? It's a good question. I'm so glad you asked. Let me explain. You've heard of serial killers, right? People will go out and they will kill somebody, and then they'll kill somebody else, and then they'll kill somebody else, but they only kill one at a time. Well, in the Western civilization, we have serial marriages in that somebody will get married to a person, and then after a few years, they'll get divorced, and then they'll remarry somebody else, and then after a few years, they'll get divorced, and then they'll remarry somebody else. And that's common in today's society. That happens quite a bit. I know a guy right now that is always, for some reason, I don't know why, he thinks he is God's gift to women. And I've tried to tell him that if he is, it's a gag gift, because he's not that great of a person. But he's been married 12 times. Hey, I'm sorry, but 12 times, that's just, and I know somebody else been married 7 times in his family. That's just, that's a serial marrier. That's somebody who gets married just for the sake of getting married, and then gets divorced, and then gets remarried, and then, why, and now, is it, there's a lot of places that believe that, divorce is the unforgivable sin. It's not. I'm sorry. It's if God can forgive a murderer, he can forgive you for getting divorced. Right? There's some people that say that, well, you can't do this if you've been divorced because you can only be the husband of one wife. Okay. They got remarried. They're only married to one person. Right? It's not like they have 5 or 6 wives running around. Right? But no, God doesn't like divorce. But it happens. And if somebody gets divorced, they can be forgiven. Remarried, God will accept that. All right? So there's just people that get legalistic about it. But at this time, polygamy, multiple marriages was not uncommon. So now, here's Jacob married to Leah and Rachel. But he doesn't want Leah. He wants Rachel. He loves Rachel. Doesn't really love Leah. Okay? All right, let's move on. And when the Lord saw that Leah was hated, he opened her womb, but Rachel was barren. And Leah conceived and bare a son, and she called his name Reuben. For she said, surely the Lord hath looked upon my affliction. Now therefore my husband will love me. And she conceived again, and bare a son, and said, because the Lord hath heard I was hated, he hath therefore given me this son also. And she called his name Simeon. And she conceived again, and bare a son. And he said, now this time will my husband be joined unto me, because I have borne him 3 sons? Therefore was his name called Levi. And she conceived again, and bare a son. And she said, Now will I praise the Lord. Therefore she called his name Judah, and left bearing. Now, Jacob didn't like Leah. But obviously, it didn't keep him from, going into conceiving children with Leah. Right? But Rachel was barren. So God's compassion for Leah is really pretty touching. Because when you look at it, she is probably the only innocent party in this whole mess. So God can bring comfort and blessing to a wife and meet her needs even when a husband acts ungodly. God was good to Leah. I mean, he gave her all these children. So God was good to Leah, even when her husband and her sister weren't. God opens her womb to have children, and he closes the womb of Rachel. So the one that he despises and hates is punching out kids left and right. The one he loves isn't giving him anything. The firstborn, the one who is entitled to the blessing, is entitled to the inheritance, is entitled to the birthright, comes not from the woman he loves, but from the woman that he hated because he was deceived into marrying her. Reuben, the firstborn child of Jacob and the logical one to inherit the promise of God, came with a woman he did not love. Think about that. Does that sound familiar? That happened to anybody else that we've talked about? Who was it? There was somebody else that we've talked about before that had... Oh, yeah, Abraham. That's the guy. Yeah, that's the fella. Yeah. Although it was Sarah that put him up to it, but it was still, Abraham didn't love Hagar, and yet the child comes from Hagar. But it wasn't, Ishmael was not the one that was entitled to the birthright. Okay? That was Isaac. But now the one that is entitled to the birthright, Reuben, is the one that comes from the woman that Jacob didn't even love. And yet she's the one that's bringing him a child.
Now, Leah's son Judah goes through the birth of Christ, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's the line that comes through. Yeah. And it is the 12 tribes will come down through there. And that's, so right now they've got, and we'll see next week the other ones. So of the first 4 sons that were born to Leah, these are the first of the 4 tribes of Israel. Okay? So this...
And the other girl that wasn't loved, her children came through. No, I'm talking about another from Jacob. Also, wasn't there? Jacob had through a daughter-in-law that wasn't loved. All his.
Oh, yeah.
If I'm trying to remember it right, and then her twins, one of them
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And we're going to start getting into more and more of that in chapter 30. Going through. Yeah. So we got done a little bit early tonight. But any questions, comments, concerns, amens, oh me's? The plot thickens. It is. It's turning into,
Just reading it yourself.
as
It doesn't have the meaning.
the meaning. Yeah, until you get in there and you start going, wow, yeah. The plot thickens, and it is as Israel turns. We'll just name it the soap opera as Israel turns. Okay. All right. Any other questions, comments, concerns, amens, oh me's? All right then. Pastor, take us out.
Thank you for joining us today. We pray you were blessed by the broadcast. If you have a prayer request or questions about Solid Rock Tabernacle, please visit our website at www.solidrocktabernacle.org. That's www.solidrocktabernacle.org. On behalf of the pastors and congregation here at Solid Rock Tabernacle, we pray you have a blessed week, and we invite you to join us in person or on one of our future broadcasts.